Welcome to the Champs App podcast, where we help players and parents demystify the world of minor hockey development and recruiting for both girls and boys. On today's episode, we talk all about youth hockey development. Specifically, we go deep on skating, passing, puck handling, and shooting for girls, boys, and even goalies. Our expert guests are Jon Cara and Dwayne Gylywoychuk from the Rink Hockey Academy in Winnipeg. I learned a lot during our conversation, and I hope you do too. Please note that Dwayne had to head back on the ice about halfway through our conversation, so Jon handled the last few questions by himself. Before we get to our guest, if you enjoyed this episode and want us to keep making more of them, please share it with teammates and friends. You can also subscribe, like, follow, and even better, it would be great if you would leave us a review. Now, let's drop the puck and get to the show. I'm very excited to have on the podcast Jon Cara and Dwayne Chewy Gylywoychuk. Jon Cara is the Director of On-Ice Programming at the RINK Training Centre in Winnipeg. In addition, he is the skating and skills coach with the Winnipeg Ice junior hockey team. Jon has been a skills coach for about 20 years and has worked with a number of NHL, AHL, Canadian University, and WHL hockey players. Chewy is a coach and consultant with the RINK Training Centre. He was previously an assistant coach with both the Canadian Girls Under-18 team and the Canadian Women's Olympic team in 2018. He's also a former player, assistant, and head coach with the Brandon Wheat Kings of the Canadian Western Hockey League. And in addition, his professional career took him to several non-traditional markets in the U.S., in Texas, Kansas, North Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana. Welcome to the podcast, Jon and Chewy. You guys are laughing.
Thank you, Ray. It's good intros. A couple edits in there, but that was pretty good.
Great. Hey, so why don't we start off the podcast, kind of just sharing a little bit about your hockey backgrounds and your hockey history. For folks who are listening to the podcast, I actually found out about Jon by listening to a podcast a few months ago. He was on the Hockey IQ podcast and went into great detail about skating and skates and skate blades and sharpening and all that kind of stuff. And since I was heading to Winnipeg over the Christmas break, I reached out to him, and then my kids did some skills training with him as well with Chewy, and my kids came away really impressed, and so did I. So I asked them to come on the podcast. So Jon, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so first off, thanks for having us on here. Anytime we can get on and talk hockey, I know it's something Chewy and I and our whole group here usually do on a daily basis, but it's nice to get outside that mold and share some things with you today. So for me, my background, not as decorated as Chewy, but started playing minor hockey at a small town here in Manitoba. Had the opportunity to play junior a little bit in the Western League in the BCHL, and then finished off with playing CIS here. I came home to play for the Bisons. For me, it was always a struggle, to be honest with you. I was always a really strong skater when I played the game, but I always struggled to be able to put it together on the ice. And minor hockey, like I said, in a small town, had some success there, but the transition to junior was real tough for me. And when I got into the coaching side of the game, I was really drawn to the skills side of it. Specifically, skating was where I started. And for me, it was about making the connection for players that, I had struggled with. So the ability to take, a player that is a strong skater, how can you get him to apply those aspects into his game so he can now have success in a tactical setting. So for me, from a coaching standpoint, that's what's always driven me. And it's something that, I've always loved to do. Even when I, started it when I was 14, I worked at a hockey school. And I remember telling my dad after the week just how rewarding it was. So, that's really what drives me, is making that connection for players and having that light turn on for them that, I struggled with when I played. So.
Got it. I saw that firsthand of you really enjoying helping players out. All right, Chewy, tell us what made you such a great player when you let you play in the WHL and play pro for so many years.
That might be an edit there. I'd be a great player. For me, I grew up in Winnipeg. I grew up playing minor hockey in Winnipeg, and we always, when I was at the age to make a decision to either go down to the NCAA route, University of North Dakota was big. We had it every Friday, Saturday on the local cable channel to watch those games, and I had a few, people from Winnipeg that I knew went to college, but then, the Western Hockey League was always the draw. I made the decision to go there when I was 16. Played 5 years in the Western Hockey League, then went from there to play some minor pro to chase my dream of, making it to the NHL. And bounced around a little bit and kind of started to really realize that the game was starting to move a lot quicker. If you shot the puck over the boards into the stands, it started to become a penalty instead of a line change just for me. And then I also knew as a big slow-footed defenseman that the game started moving a little too quick for me. So I realized that after my time in England, when I played there, that I wanted to stay in the game. I wanted to become a coach, and I had an opportunity to go back and work with the Brandon Wheat Kings, the same organization I played my junior at, and had a great opportunity to go back and work there with Kelly McCrimmon. And he gave me kind of an open book, how to, from the organization, from scouting to how the organization worked as a junior hockey club. And then kind of just get my niche as a coach. And one of the things that I really learned at an early age is that the way you learn the game as a coach is you got to watch video. And I really realized how important video is and how much of a teaching tool it is. And I've really kind of made my niche in that, is that it's important to show players not only what they're doing, wrong during a game or some different choices they can make during the game, but you've got to back it up with video after. And if you can show them why they're doing it and what the outcome might be on video, then they're really going to grasp it, especially today's athlete. And, I coached in Brandon for a long time, had some really good, success there, but it all came down to the opportunity I was given with the organization and the players that they brought in. And when you have good players, good quality people you're coaching, it's easy to become a coach. And that's what drives me as a coach, is that if you have kids that are dedicated, then you've got to be dedicated as a coach. You got to be prepared. You got to be organized, because otherwise they'll see right through you. And that's what I love about the game. From there, I went to Hockey Canada, was able to work on the women's side, and able to work with some elite athletes across Canada that are playing NCAA Division I or new sport across Canada. And that was a different challenge all over again, because those are dedicated athletes. They want to make the best of it. When they go to the Olympics, when they play in World Championships, that's their NHL, that's their Stanley Cup championships, and that's what they strive for. So that was the challenges all over again, because in the women's game, it's still the same systems, it's the same hockey, it's the same, puck, all that kind of stuff. It's just obviously a little bit of a dynamic on how the hockey players made up. But at the end of the day, when they get on the ice, they just want to be treated like hockey players. So it's a different challenge as a coach, and I really grew a lot as a coach working with Hockey Canada. And then from there, after the Olympics, I just kind of wanted a break. I wanted somewhere where I could just kind of teach, not go through the trials and tribulations as a coach and the headaches that keep you up all night as a coach. But I think that the coaching blood is always going to be in me. My dad was a teacher, so I think I kind of got that characteristic from him. And now working at the rink, I'm able to do a little bit of everything, do some one-on-ones. I'm able to work with the teams. I'm able to do, stuff with coaches in associations close to the rink. But at the end of the day, everybody's just a coach. And, one of the biggest things that we have here at the rink is that, they can go on the ice, do some skill development, but then we can connect it, on another session where they might be able to use this, show them how they're going to use it in a game. And I think that's important in today's game. You have a lot of skill coaches out there, skating coaches out there, but you've got to be able to tell the athlete how it's going to help them in their hockey sense or in their game sense. And I think that's something that sets us apart from everybody else.
Gotcha. Yeah. So why don't we get into exactly what the Rink Hockey Academy is all about, and the rink facility. I was there for the new facility for the first time over the holidays. I was at your old facility several years ago when my kids were, really young players, and holy smokes, what a big difference. I mean, that's just the brand new facility is just pristine. It's got 3 rinks and more. So why don't you guys just talk about what the whole facility is about, and as well as just the overall programming.
For sure. Did you have a time limit on Chewy's intro there? Because I thought went a little bit long, but that's okay. But yeah, no, our facility, obviously for us as a group, was a dream come true. Like you said, you saw our old facility. We used to have basically 120 by 50 ice sheet that was jammed in just to the max size that we could get in, as well as a goalie pad. And then moving into this facility, I mean, we've got a full ice sheet within it. We've got a gym upstairs. We've got a training sheet now that's a 120 by 60. And we've got our goalie sheet as well. That's a little bit bigger than our previous one. I think it's around a 60 by 40. But for us, when we were looking at the concepts of building our new facility, one of the biggest things we wanted to maintain was that training, or that small sheet. We felt it was something that really separated us from, our competitors and everybody basically in our area. that we were able to develop skill development programming on that sheet, plus 3-on-3 programs for players from, 3 years old learning how to skate, all the way up to professional players, and also those, beer leaguers or adults that are, now looking to learn the game that, we were able to teach their kids. So, we're obviously every day we're so lucky to have this facility and the support of our owners to build a facility like this. I don't think there's any other facility like it in, Canada right now. So,
And you guys have, the facility also hosts the Winnipeg Ice junior hockey team. Is that correct? As well as you guys have your own teams, the Hockey Academy. So maybe just talk about the Academy a little bit and how that works.
Yeah, so the Rink Hockey Academy, we have 4 teams that play out our facility, with 3 male teams, which is our U15, our U16, and our U18 team. And then we have a female prep team. So we have 4 teams that play out our facility. The kids attend Shaftesbury High School in the morning. They'll go to school in the morning, and then they'll take a bus from the school to our facility every day. And they'll arrive here about 12:15. And, it's very detailed, organized. Their schedules are, thought out and long process with their coaches. And basically one team will go on the big sheet, one team will go up to the gym, the other team will go on the training sheet, and the other team will go into a boardroom and do a classroom session. So whether that's watching video, whether that's some personal development they do with those players as people. But then, they just do a rotation through it. They play in the Canadian Sports School Hockey League, so it's a very competitive league for all 4 of our teams. And, I think it's a really good stepping stone for these kids. They all either want to make the Canadian Hockey League, the Western Hockey League, or they want to get into the NCAA youth sport. And it really gives them, a good advantage among other kids. They come in here, they arrive from school, they'll do an off-ice workout, they'll do an on-ice workout, they'll do some video sessions, some personal development with their coaches, and then they're gone home by 4:30. They're sitting down having a family supper with their family, and they have the rest of the night off. Their travel schedule is kind of hectic at times, but we try and make that travel as simple for them. All they have to do is worry about playing hockey. When you become an RHA athlete, you walk through the doors, that's, your parents pay the tuition, and that's all they have to worry about. Everything else is taken care of. We're very lucky under here. It's a one-stop shop. We have, Testify upstairs in the gym, where they have all the therapy that's needed to become a good hockey player, whatever's needed to, put yourself that opportunity. And then we add in John's group and his, hockey development that work with those teams every day, the skill coaches, goalie coaches, and a rink goalie development. So we're pretty lucky to have all that with those academy kids. And we just really feel it's a really good product for the development of the kids that want to do that.
Gotcha. And two quick questions. So the students, do they board, do they billet, or do they just live at home?
If they're outside the city limits, so outside the city of Winnipeg, they would be billeted with families. A lot of them, will make connections through a player that they've played spring hockey with or played a tournament with. But if not, we have a billeting coordinator that takes care of all that for us, and make sure there's a right fit. So if it's that if you like animals, we try and fit. If somebody has dogs or cats or siblings at home, if you have younger kids, then it's always good to try and fit with siblings and all that. We try and make that transition as easy as it is.
Gotcha. And on the girls team, do you also play like the local girls prep schools like Balmoral Hall or St. Mary's, which I know are the 2 kind of big girls hockey schools in Winnipeg?
Yeah, we do play St. Mary's. They're in the same league as our girls in the female prep. Balmoral's in the JW League, in the Junior Women's Hockey League, I think the right name for that is. But they do play exhibition games against them. There's some flex games that we have the ability to do. So there's always a competition within the city limits and who's got the best prep team. So that those games are always organized and much anticipated.
Yeah, and I believe Sarah Zacharias, the coach of the Balmoral Hall team, was a guest on one of our first episodes. So she talked about the school on that one. All right. And so my last question related to RHA is, what's the relationship with the RHA program in Kelowna, in BC, British Columbia?
So recently, just over the last year, the RHA Kelowna previously was the Pursuit of Excellence. So we had the ability to come in and be able to expand not only our programming, but our academy base out into the BC region with the acquisition of the Pursuit. So with the pursuit, we acquired the Pursuit of Excellence teams, which was 6 teams that we acquired. And as well, we acquired the Edge of Excellence camps from them as well. So, on both sides development, but more so on the academy side, the acquisition of, entry into BC with 6 teams and throughout all the different divisions in the CSSHL was the easiest way for us to gain entry into that market. And was a great opportunity for us to do that based on an established organization, that had a good reputation at that time.
Had a great reputation, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and they also had some links to Manitoba with, some of the camps they used to run. Winnipeg was a frequent stop among their camps, and a lot of players from Winnipeg had chosen Pursuit as a previous option for them to travel to. So, for us, like I said, great opportunity for us to acquire, 6 new teams, filled with a whole new, group of players that we didn't have access to before, and a whole new area of Canada that we didn't have exposure to, just from our standpoint of our culture and everything we do.
Gotcha. Now it all makes sense. Now I didn't realize that it was the Pursuit of Excellence. That was it. So speaking of excellence, then let's transition into player development. So start off with a really easy question. What makes a great hockey player?
Well, I think there's a lot of aspects. I think every player is different, and we try and approach every player that way as well, that every player has their strengths and weaknesses, and you want to be able to build on those strengths, but also not forget about them and just focus on their weaknesses. So, for us, the biggest components we obviously focus on for our pillars is our skating, puck handling ability, shooting, ability to compete, and obviously the character of each player that we have is a massive component to that. So, those are kind of our 4 or 5 main pillars for us, whether it be goalies or players. We really want players to be able to compete and have those foundational skills.
Chewy, what's your kind of perspective on this?
I think that, just like how Jon touched on, I think that there's all those key ingredients, those key fundamentals or skills that each hockey player has to have. But I think one of the things that's unique for us and our coaches that I know that Jon really tries to hit home is that, there isn't somebody that will poster of a hockey player that we're going to put up on the wall and say, you have to be this way. We really try to get to know the individual. We'll spend a lot of time videotaping them, spend time analyzing it, and we're going to try and make that individual as best they can to become a hockey player with different programs we run here or the skill sessions we do. But we know we can't change the person. We've got to kind of make sure it's unique to that individual. And I think that's a big thing, is that hockey players, they'll watch, whether it be the female game, Division I, Olympics, or the male game in the NHL, and they want to be like Connor McDavid. There's only one Connor McDavid. And I think that's a real important point for young hockey players to realize, is that, they can all learn how to shoot the puck like Connor McDavid, but they're not going to be Connor McDavid. I think it's really, really important for hockey players to realize that they're their own unique person. And when they get comfortable in their own unique skill set, their own unique abilities, and their own unique character, then I think it really, really takes it to the next level. And I think that's one thing we really strive to tell our hockey players here.
Gotcha. So when should players really start to take kind of their skills development seriously? Because, when my kids were growing up, almost everybody that I really kind of trusted said, just make sure they have fun until they're like 11 or 12 years old. When should they really start taking, working on their skating, working on their shooting, working on their puck handling really seriously, potentially, working with skills coaches?
Honestly, for us, Ray, it's the sooner the better. So, basically from that first time that they're putting on skates, I think that there's a misconception around, skill development and fun. I think one of the biggest things that our coaching staff tries to focus on is, and it's a challenge, is finding ways to teach players where it's still fun. So finding aspects of gameplay, finding aspects of, different elements within drills through a competitive side of it that keep players engaged. And you'll notice that in our sessions from our Learn to Skate, where players are just learning how to stand up, whether it's chasing bubbles around the ice, all the way up to our pro level guys. So the foundation of skills is built right from the first time. So like I said at the start, the sooner you can get into it, the better. Because then you're not breaking down habits. You know, the later that you get into it, then you're having to reset some of those habits, and you're limited on really what you can do with players at a certain age and a certain growth phase where they're at. So for us, the sooner the better, and that's the way we've built our program. Is we've built it around a progressive stage of drills, progressions, program offerings around what a player needs at each level. And we feel that the sooner a player can get into it and go through our progression, similar to swimming or martial arts, the sooner they can get into it and work through the progressions with us, you know, the further they're going to be able to go within their own skill set. So
Gotcha. And you know, at what age is it more the kids being self-motivated and driving their own personal development versus the parents kind of pushing them? You know, for example, you know, my kids really just started becoming really self-motivated, you know, when they're around 13 or 14 years old. Up until then, you know, as long as it was fun, they wanted to go, but it was more of an effort to get them to go do stuff on their own. And then I still see kids, I talk to parents of kids on my kids team, and they still struggle to get their kids to do anything. And then there's other ones who, you know, you just can't get them off the ice. Like, obviously there's a spectrum, but what's your perspective on when kids should really be doing it all by themselves?
well, I mean, I think you've gone through it, right? And I think, again, like Chewy and I touched on, every player is going to be a little bit different. I do think at some point the players that mom and dad are driving the bus all the time, I think that, you know, you got to start to look at a certain age is how bad do they actually want to play the game, right? So I think you look at guys at an NHL level, I think most of them have had fun, they're still continuing to have fun, and you know that's why they do it, and that's what separates them. So you know, to put an age on that, I think is tough, to be honest with you, in my opinion. I think that, you know, if a player really wants to do something, you know, they're going to do it. And in some cases, I think from a parent standpoint, it's our job to say, hey, maybe you should, you know, scale it back in certain cases. A lot of parents will say, well, you know, he wants to do this. He wants to be on the ice all the time. He wants to do this. And it's like, well, you know, if you told a kid that he could eat candy every day at a meal, he probably would, but you don't as a parent, right? So, you know, it's the same thing within a player's development. Is it's your job to be able to do that. So I think it's hard to set an age on drive and right.
And Chewy, do you see any differences between boys and girls when it comes to motivation? And kind of
I think,
development?
you know, it comes down to the person. I think it comes down to the player. I think that, you know, there's always the development, and you know, I think that there's some people with, you know, my experience is that boys are going to develop a little bit quicker, you know, and then there's a stage when the girls are going to be a little bit more mature and they want to be pushed a little bit more. But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter male or female. When they walk through our doors here at the rink, they're hockey players. And I think that's a big thing that I've learned over my years coaching, is that a hockey player that's dedicated, that wants to be on the ice with you, they just want to be treated like a hockey player, and a hockey player that's pushed. And I think that's something that's really big to know. But I think it also goes back to the point that, you know, like Jon was mentioning, is that we take the time to get to know our athletes. We get the time to get to know our players. It's a big, you know, an important step for our coaches, that whether you're going out for a program, a one-on-one session, or RHA, you know, we make sure we make a connection with the families, the parents, before, after. This is what we were thinking. This is what we've got laid out for this session. We check on with them after. There's follow-up. There's always constant follow-up with our families, and we get to know our kids. And then you can kind of maybe direct families in the right direction where their kids are at right now. I think with the girls on the female side, it's still such a broad perspective on the game of hockey and what it can offer for females, that I think that there's more and more girls getting involved, but I don't think they still know a vast population of them what they can get from the game of hockey. And I think that's something that's getting better every year now with the, you know, the different professional leagues. But I still think girls, you know, don't realize that they could go and, you know, get some education playing the game of hockey, and, you know, maybe they're going to be done after their college years, but they've had an unbelievable experience. Mom and dad haven't had to remortgage the house to go to a school so they can get an education. But at the end of the day, hockey can give so many opportunities for male and females. But I just, think that the females are still getting a little bit, the door is still opening up a little bit what's there. To answer your question, there's really not an end of the day, age or whether, males or females should start earlier. It's just down to that person getting to know your kids and having the opportunity and letting them try it at the end of the day.
All right, so now we're going to move on to the skills side of things. We're going to talk about skating, passing, puck handling, and shooting with Jon. And specifically, Jon has this amazing presentation that is available on YouTube, and we'll put a link into the show notes, where he talks about the power principles of skating. It's about a 1-hour presentation, very technical, very scientific, and it's on the Hockey Arsenal YouTube page with Greg Revak, which is once again how I found Jon in the first place. So Jon, let's get into some basics of skating, since that's really an area that you have a major spike in. Is how much of skating is natural versus taught? Because two of the best skaters on one of my kids' teams, I'm pretty sure have never had a skating lesson in their life, and yet they just have an incredible natural stride.
Yeah, I think that there's definite aspects of being a natural skater. Like I touched on before, like I think a lot of analyzing that and a lot of what life is through experience. So, if I look at myself, skating was always my thing. I think that was something at every level that, every guy I played with or every guy that, had the opportunity to have as a coach. I think when they think back on me, that's probably the first thing they remember is my skating ability. So when I look at my progression of skating, I used to do the Ken skate programs here in Canada, and I would fail every year at them. So I'd do it and I would fail, and then I'd have to do it again. Then I'd just get moved on because I had done it twice, right? So, for me to say that I was a natural skater right from the start would be a lie, right? So, I did a lot of work with it. My dad used to do a lot of work with me on my skating. He didn't have a ton of hockey playing background, but he was a athletic guy. He was more on the football side of things, but he he really pushed me in a lot of ways to work on my skating. And to be honest with you, again, the first skating school that I ever went to outside of learning how to skate was the Edge of Excellence with David Roy, and I went there for one summer and took a ton of things out of that I could work at. But outside of that, again, coming back to your question before about when do you start into skill development, for me, it was the very first times I learned how to skate was in Ken Skate, and it really established it for me. But the one other aspect for skating that I think is important that, parents and players realize is that you can put your son or daughter in as many skating programs as you want. But it's what they do after they leave there. So for me, for example, I went to Edge of Excellence, and I remember them saying, okay, it's going to be a week-long camp. We're only going to touch on certain topics each day, but we want you to have takeaways from this that you can work at when you go back with your teams. And, specifically for me, I remember learning about tight turns and upper body rotation. And every minor hockey practice when I went back after I was done there, I took some time at the end of practice to work at my tight turns. So, when I had buddies that went to the camp and we went for the 1 week and they really needed to work at their skating, and they didn't do anything when we went back with our teams. So it's a constant everyday thing that you have to work at. So for me, there is some God-given talent within it, but it's really the player who's going to take the time to work at that area of the game and do some of it every day. Right.
That's an excellent point for folks to hear on this podcast. So
For sure.
that it's an everyday thing. So here's an interesting question: is there a right way versus a wrong way to skate? And let me give you some context. So there is a local team here where the coach tells the kids no crossovers. You're not allowed to do crossovers. I don't believe in it. And then I was speaking to another former NHLer who kind of lives here locally. He said he doesn't believe in that philosophy. He says he was referring to Pavel Bure and Sergei Fedorov when he played in the league, and he goes, are they both great skaters? Yes. Are they? And so who should you skate like? Because they're completely different skaters. So, is there a right way and a wrong way to skate?
So for us, I mean, this is with everything. We apply this to everything, but our theory is never say never and never say always. So the minute that you say to a player, you're never going to use that in a game, you've now challenged them, if they are passionate about it, to go home and watch a hockey game, and they're probably gonna find it, come back to you to show that it happens at an NHL level. So, and same on the other side of saying that you're always going to do this. There are going to be times in a game where players do things out of reacting, that you are going to want to work at and you're going to want to apply. So for us, when it comes to the skating side of things, no, there's no one right way or wrong way. It's what's, again, efficient within that individual player. If you look at two of the best or three of the best in the game right now, I mean, Eichel's not playing, McDavid and McKinnon. If you take all three of those players, there's different variations that they do on the ice in each technique they do. Their strides are different. The length of Eichel's stride as opposed to McDavid's stride is different. He's more of a velocity-based skater, right? Where he's generating a ton of power from that stride length, and he's got bigger feet than McDavid. You look at McDavid, his lacing pattern's different on his skates. He doesn't go all the way to the top. He's got one eyelet open. You look at Eichel, he's got his skates laced all the way to the top. Arm swing, another thing that's highly debated. Every player swings their arms differently. So no right way, no wrong way. For us, like I said at the start of this, was, never say never and never say always. And that's the theory that we use when we approach, everything from a development standpoint.
Are there certain types of mechanics that clearly are better or worse? So, for example, not all of them, but there are a certain reasonably sized percentage of girls who skate very hunched over. Same with some boys as well. Like one of the best hockey players in the world in the history of the game played pretty hunched over. But are there certain things like posture or arm stride that you were talking about that are clearly preferred one over the other?
I mean, obviously body position's a big thing, just based on where your weight sits on your skates. But again, for us, certain players have the athletic ability to get into that, skating position, or that 90-degree position that some people will talk about, or certain degrees of skating. But again, that's where the aspects of understanding, the skate boot you're in, understanding your lacing pattern, understanding your profile, understanding your hollow, where you can make adjustments within that for players that will help in some of those areas that genetically, body type, makeup, that they're just not going to get to. And another area that we do a lot of work with our players in, is the connection of the on ice and off ice. So if a player can't do it off ice, they're going to have a lot of trouble doing it on ice. So that's usually our first place we start with analysis for, body position. But I would say, again, we get pretty specific with each player on, their skating. There's the obvious foundational things that you're building on, from knee bend, which every coach says, to, getting your upper body up and your head up. But every player is a little different in the way we shape it. So.
Gotcha. And you start to get a little technical with the actual skate and the boot and the lacing and the blade. So over the weekend, I was at a tournament, and I was present when a few of one of my kids' teammates, they were all giving in their skates to get sharpened. And the sharpener said, how do you want it cut? And they all went 1/2 inch. So, I know since you've had some experience with my kids and you have a point of view on this, maybe just talk about, the cut of the skate, and talking about glide versus stride versus bite and things like that.
Sure.
That had a big impact on my kids.
Yeah, well, I think that, again, this is just the whole evolution of, our coaches having as much experience on the ice as they can, is that, you and I both skate differently. And when we get on the ice, I'm going to work with you, and I'm going to show you different ways that you can improve in a tight turn or forward stride. But at the end of the day, you can harp on a kid as much for knee bend or stride length. But it's the more intricate aspects that you can start to look at. So when you're really analyzing a player at the start of this, you've got to look and look at their skates. A lot of players, they've got their skates laced way too tight, for their body type. They might not be able to create that knee bend that you're constantly harping on them for. One adjustment can make that difference. Same thing with, you touched on the hollow or the profile of their skates. Like, ask them about it. There's standard profiles out there. They probably don't know that. You know, they've been told by a skate sharpener at some point maybe that his stone's set at 5/8, so that's what they work with, which is totally amicable to, you know, the way that we are, is that, you know, we do accept things a certain way, but every player is going to be a little different. So some players might need more glide, some players might need more bite based on the, you know, the weight that they are on their skates. So it's very important from, you know, an aspect of a skill development standpoint or a professional skill development standpoint, is that you have that ability to analyze or make those suggestions to players that really can make a difference. Because there's two aspects or two tools. If you look at, you know, everybody in their field, there's tools that they have to use to help them to be successful. For hockey players, it's skates and sticks. Outside of that, if they have a great stick and they're comfortable with their stick and their curve, they're not going to look down at the puck as much. They're going to handle it. They're going to be able to release it. That improves their game. Skating wise, if they have no questions around their skates and they're comfortable and they're efficient with that, they're going to skate fine and they're going to be in a good spot. So those are two areas that we look at analyzing for players. And outside of that, the rest of it will fall into place for them.
Gotcha. So before we get into sticks and passing and shooting, one last question on skating for goalies. So when I was growing up, everybody said goalies need to be the best skater on the ice. And my actual experience has been they're actually not. You know, a lot of them work at it, but they're really nowhere near as good as the, you know, the players. So what's your perspective on goalies and skating?
Yeah, well, I honestly think when I was growing up, some of the goalies I played with were honestly some of the best skaters. And, you know, it seems like more and more over the years that aspect has been lost a little bit. But I know that within our development programs here, like skating is a massive component. So, you know, what I would say is that in the past, a lot of goalies would have to seek out that power skating program. So we used to have a lot of goalies that would sign up for our power skating programs so they could get that skating work. Whereas now the way we've created our programs is in our goalie development programming, skating is an aspect of every session. So they focus a ton on inside edges. They focus a ton on where the weight is on your blades. And again, you're in a different boot, so everything's a little bit different. But the fact that we've started to take that aspect and have goalies work at it has been a huge benefit for, you know, a lot of our guys in improving their skating. So it is a huge aspect in my opinion, and a lot of it is awareness of engaging blades, engaging the inside edges, and being able to use those properly for goalies. That's a huge thing that we focus on here.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's move on to the stick related activities. So you said having the right stick. How do you figure out what the right stick is for you?
Well, 100% it's trial and error, right? And, you know, obviously when you get to a professional level, you're going to have access to, you know, a ton of different options. But, you know, it again, it's unique to each player. It's unique in how they hold their hands on their sticks. It's unique in the fact of the length of the stick. But, you know, for us, when we look at a stick blade, there's basically two areas now on the stick blade. So you've got that heel to middle area. That's essentially where all of your passing, puck control takes place. And from that middle to toe, different than when you and I played, it used to be, you know, we didn't have options for flex. So we had to load it up at the heel, roll it all the way through right to the toe, right? Almost like a jumbo jet taking off. You need that whole, you know, airstrip to be able to take off. Whereas now the way sticks are made, you're going to see success happen a lot with curves that just have that curve from the middle to the toe. And because that's where a lot of your release is coming now for players. And the fact that players can create flex at a young age, when you have a 20 flex stick, you can actually shoot and be able to generate more power without having to use that whole blade. And that's where you're seeing the Line A's and the Matthews and guys like that have grown up with this stick technology, shooting completely different than anybody's seen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always used to go heel to toe on my wrist shot,
Yep.
and that's why I'm still a really bad hockey player. So let's so now that we got the stick out of the way, let's talk about passing. So what does it take to become a great passer, and why? Like when I look at, you know, the kids that I see playing hockey, and look at skating, passing, puck handling, and shooting, the one I'm always most disappointed in is the passing. So why is it so hard to become such a good passer?
Because I think everybody thinks it's too easy, so they stop working at it. But no, I mean, I think that one of the biggest aspects that we try and promote in our players is just on ice awareness. So, you know, basic training with their eyes up, being able to scan, being able to really take pictures of, you know, where options are, but also having an understanding of the game. So if I move to this area, you know, what ice am I opening, whether I'm skating into it or I'm passing to it. But again, I would jump back to the stick technology, and a lot of, you know, players are still being taught the same way that, you know, we've all seen the Mighty Ducks, you know, pass reception, you've got the eggs on the ice. It's all about soft hands. Well, with stick technology now, it's all about bunting the hands towards the puck. So you should be able to bunt your hands towards the puck, be able to stop it a lot quicker because of the way sticks are made. We can use that pop to be able to stop it and be able to move it. So little fundamental things like that. But for us, a good passer is someone that just has great on ice awareness and a real understanding of the game. Because from that aspect, that's what allows them to be able to put the puck in right spaces, as well as putting it, you know, in a good spot for the person that they're passing to, right? So
yeah. And I heard Darryl Belfry recently say that, you know, some of the challenges for the best hockey players is that the passes that they get are too hard. They actually want to be able to catch it soft. So how do you make a hard pass but make it catchably, you know, catchably soft for the receiver?
yeah, well, I think like for us, that would come to the reception portion of things. And you know, at the NHL level, obviously, I mean, the passes are coming super hard, right? So one of the things we work with our guys a lot on is giving imperfect passes. And I think part of that sometimes is that Chewy and I don't pass the puck very well, but working with our guys, you know, we'll throw passes in the skates, we'll throw passes behind them. And I remember one of the first times working with one of our pro guys, I threw him a bad pass behind him or whatever, you know, and say skate up, hey, sorry, that was a bad pass. And he was like, no, like that's exactly what I need. I need passes that I am working at all around my body. So behind me, in front of me, in my skates, because that's what happens in a game. And the higher levels you get to, it's very rare that you're going to see a perfect pass, especially in a 5-on-5 situation, that you're going to see perfect passes all the time. You know, half the things that fans don't notice in games is a lot of the passes as they're coming, they're not flat all the time. But
Yeah.
these guys are able to pick them up. They pick them up, settle them. They don't have to dust it off, and they're able to make a play. So, you know, I would challenge that, you know, a lot of the players as they're going along and growing up in their game is challenging them in those weaker areas. So, you know, I can remember one summer skating with Duncan Keith, and we were doing just a basic 3-line shooting drill. And he asked, he said strictly, he said, I want pass on my backhand side every time. What I'm doing, I want on my backhand. I was like, okay, on your backhand. And then another time he's like, I want in my skates. I want every pass in my skates now. So right away, you know, there's a player that's obviously had a, you know, an amazing career, but we come back to what separates players. You know, those are those little things. Like guys they know they're not great at them. They know that's what it's going to be like in a game. So, you know, they'll request specific things, right? So, passing, I think, is a huge aspect that now that challenges me as a passer to be able to put it in his skates, which is something I'm not focused on all the time, right? So, all those aspects, I think, are what separate players is challenging themselves to work at those different areas, right? So
yeah, no, great. So you covered my my question that I was going to ask you about catching pucks on the backhand. So that's perfect.
Okay.
All right, let's move over to puck handling. So what I've seen, at least at the youth level, is there are some kids who just have unbelievable hands, right? They're either working on them all the time or they're just naturally gifted to move the puck really quickly. And then there's the 90% of everybody else who really needs to work on like moving that puck, you know, in multiple directions and with speed. What suggestions you have for kids to really raise their puck handling ability, and not just like using cones and things like that, because you know those don't simulate real game situations.
yeah, I think you know, one of the biggest things is working with first off awareness. So as players are doing all those types of drills, is challenging them to use their eyes to be able to scan, to be able to identify certain aspects. You can add in multi-pucks with some of those drills where they've got to have a puck, you know, 2 pucks, they got to be able to pass one to you, exchange a puck with them. But for a lot of it, it is awareness. Once they get past the awareness component is then adding in that resistance, right? So
When you say
now we've
awareness,
got-
what do you mean by awareness exactly?
So for us, the awareness component is being able to identify, when you have a puck, not having to look down at it at a time, being able to keep your eyes up, being able to scan the ice, being able to identify, what numbers am I holding up? Where are my passing options? Where am I moving to? What ice have I created? So, as soon as you add in a puck for players, we talked about skating at the start, you're going to see as soon as you add in a puck for players at a young age, all of a sudden, a lot of their technique falls apart, their eyes go down, right? So for us, it's that awareness piece. And again, we talked about sticks before. The awareness piece, you're going to see more confidence in players when they have a good stick because they're not going to be looking down as much. They're going to have that. Now, from there, once we have the awareness, then it's putting them in situations where they're under pressure. So now they have to be able to react. They have the awareness piece. Now I've got to be able to react. Okay, that player moves there. I'm going to move here. Right. So really fundamentally for us, it's, getting comfortable handling a puck, but then awareness and then basically adding in those tactical components where you've got pressure.
Right. So you addressed my question about practicing with pressure. Now, how can you do that without anybody around you? Like, how can you practice, stick handling or puck handling under pressure without, all by yourself?
It's a tough thing to be able to do all on your own. That is a great question. I'm just trying to think of some of the things we do. Like a lot of our stuff is in one-on-one settings, so we will have coaches adding in pressure. But I would say a lot of times when you're doing, puck handling on your own, one of the biggest things you're challenging yourself with is that awareness component. So, you might not have pressure or whatever, but I think still visually you can still have yourself, looking to certain areas, challenging yourself to find certain key points, which is then going to apply, into that. This is, funny story type thing, but, we talk about things, puck handling under pressure. A lot of it is puck protection work. And it's funny, growing up with a brother or sister in your house, one of the biggest things you work at is being able to use your body to protect for puck protection. So, if you've got something that your brother or sister wants, you'll tease them and hold it out for them. But as soon as they come, first thing you do is move it away, and now you're using your body to protect, right? So not necessarily puck handling, but those aspects of puck protection, I think, people are working at them every day. So, but I don't know if that answers that question accurately.
No, that's great. That's great. It's just think of different ways to challenge yourself to do it is kind of the key to it.
Yeah, and be creative. I think the biggest thing with puck handling is all too often we limit players, just to stick handling between the toes, stick handling here. But you watch the game now, the things that players are doing, they're creative. So you want to encourage your player to be creative and have some fun with it too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got two more puck handling questions. So how do you feel about devices on the ice? Cones, practice, little fake sticks with little fake legs and things like that on it. How do you feel about that for puck handling?
Again, everything serves a purpose if used properly. So I think getting players comfortable, in aspects of a drill by using some stationary aspects, makes sense, but it's how you evolve from there. It's your next step from there. So I would say all too often that, some people rely on them, way too much. For us here, we have them and we use them as a way for players to grasp the concept. But then from there, it's the next step. Okay, what's next? Like they're not going to be attacking a stationary object in a game. So, if you're putting in those components with the use of, on ice equipment, etc., 100%, there's definitely a use for it. But it's just, I find in certain aspects that there's a real reliance on it as the only way to work at your hands. And that's where I think players start to get limited by just doing that.
Got it. Okay, now I have to ask my my goalie question, since I know I've got a lot of goalie parents who listen to the podcast. How often should goalies be working on their puck handling?
Again, we talked about skating before in our programs. Puck handling's in every session. So, and it's working on similar puck handling setups as players. So you're working at, starting just stationary. So you're doing figure eights, you're doing between your toes, forehand, backhand, around your body, wide and narrow. But then you're putting it into drills where they have to apply it. So pucks are rimmed, they got to get out, they got to stop it, they got to control it, get in a good spot, and they got to move it, right? Because that's where the majority of goaltenders' puck handling is going to come in. So, with our goalie side, we do a ton of work with, skating and stick handling as warm-up drills, and then getting into your practice and building it in, right? So, huge aspect for goalies to work at. And obviously, should be obvious, but with a goalie stick and with a glove and a blocker on. I mean,
Yeah.
I do think that it's good for, goalies, if there are, you're playing a fun game, a parent game, get the goalie out of the game and get them to play out for that game. A lot of the best goalies that I played with, one of my buddies at university, best goalie I've ever played with for puck handling, he played out all the time. So he would play out in the spring hockey, he'd play out for ball hockey, and that just naturally built his puck handling ability, right? So.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. I'm going to have a lot of goalie parents really happy with the
Nice.
answer to your question on that one. All right, we're running out of time, so I want to get to the shooting part of things, which is obviously
Sure.
what kids probably care most about.
Yeah.
How do you think about, when it comes to shooting, accuracy versus power versus time of release? Which should kids work on first as they're, let's say I want to get better at my snapshot or my wrist shot. How do I think about what's the progression in each of those items?
It's an interesting question. Like for us, when we teach it, our progression, we start with the power generation portion of it at our younger ages, basically just getting, efficient movements on your shot, before getting into the accuracy side of it. So, I mean, our progression would be, power, and that's something you consistently work at, but getting power and getting efficiency with that so that you got that, good hard shot in different situations, and then adding in the accuracy component. And it's interesting that as you evolve and the game gets faster and faster, that on ice awareness piece is massive with shooting, because the higher levels you get to, you don't have time to get the puck, look at the net, and get your shot off. A lot of times you watch the best players in the game, they're not looking at the net all the time. They know where they are on the ice. They know goalie movement patterns. They know when they get that puck that this is where I got to put it based on where that goalie should be. Right. So a lot of guys now at the higher levels are starting to study, goalies. So we'll have guys that reach out that are struggling with scoring, and what we'll do is we'll analyze, okay, who are your next two goalies that you might face in the next couple games? Here's the way they look. Here's the goals against them. Here's some tendencies that we picked up on it, because that's what guys need at the higher levels. So for us, if I had to circle back, answer, it would be power and then accuracy. But then, the awareness and understanding of the game is a huge aspect as you get higher up.
Gotcha. All right. So each player has different strengths and weaknesses when it comes to shooting. One has a better wrist shot, better snap shot, better slap shot. My kids are completely different in terms of what their strengths are when it comes to shooting. What should they work on, their strengths or their weaknesses?
You want to continue to work at your strengths, but you also want to be able to look at, okay, why is this my weakness? So what within that shot, which comes back to that analysis, what within that wrist shot are you struggling at? And then that's the thing you work at. Is it your top hand? Is your top hand turned over, limiting you when you're releasing? Are you bringing the puck too far back that your top hand comes outside of your belly button or that midpoint of your body, right? So being able to analyze and make those adjustments for players and then having them work at it, that's how they're going to improve at it. But you don't want to neglect, and, if that's your best shot, take it and make it exceptional, right? Like that's the difference, is don't just stop on something. You got to keep going at that and do that. Do 10 to 15 of those and then do 30 of the other ones the right way, right? So you don't want to lose those strengths. And that's the same way we coach here is, okay, we look at a player, here's their top 3 strengths. Here's a couple things they can work at. We're going to do some of the strengths, and then we're going to do some of the weaknesses, right? So, that would be a big aspect, is to not neglect your best shot, especially with shooting.
Gotcha. Okay, we got to wrap up. So, we talked about skating, we talked about passing, we talked about puck handling, we talked about shooting. How would you prioritize the 4 skills kind of by age group? Let's just say under 12 to 16 and older.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, but like at a young age, obviously the skating aspect is the biggest thing. You want to establish skating. Once you work through the skating aspect, one of the biggest things that we're working on with players right now is puck control and passing, especially at those younger ages. And then the shooting aspect actually is part of our build from passing. So the mechanics of passing relate perfectly right into shooting. So that would kind of lead us into our shooting aspect. And then obviously as players get older, you're now trying to find small ways that you can adjust their game within that. So for us, players skating, they continue to work at it. All of a sudden, we get to that, 13 to 15 range. Okay, well now there's less space on the ice. So what are the things we can teach in small areas for them to get better at? Punch turns, toe turns, deception within that. And that evolves all the way through with our shooting. So shooting progresses to changing the angle of the shot, finding seams, receiving a pass, and shooting with less time. So every aspect, like I said, would start foundationally with skating. Then you get into your puck skills, so passing, puck control, and then evolves into your shooting aspect. But that would be our foundation, and then we just build from there as things get taken away in their games. So
that's awesome. John, I really want to thank you so much. I mean, like this is quite the education for especially for parents or kids who are still early on in the process and kind of need to understand some context on where do I go from here and what's it going to take to be successful. So I really want to thank you and Chewy so much for taking the time and sharing all your knowledge on all these different skill development topics.
Well, thanks for having us. We love talking hockey, so it's what we do every day, but it's nice to be able to share some of those things with families as well.
I really want to thank John and Chewy for coming on the podcast. There was a ton of great information and insights on how to become a better hockey player. So hopefully you got a few nuggets from our conversation. And remember, if you got something out of today's episode, we'd really appreciate it if you'd like, follow, subscribe, and even better if you could leave us a review so we can keep sharing this important hockey information with folks just like you.